Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Software Success. I'm Ashley Jones, and I'm always here to share my love of embroidery software with all of you in hopes that you'll learn to love your embroidery software as much as I do. So, if you are new to a Software Success, this is where we learn all kinds of things about our Dime by OESD embroidery software. I love to create fun projects, some of them just fun and exciting, some of them really useful. Today, I feel like we're talking about a very useful topic, something that is functional. But there's so many different things we can do with our software. It can help us with our cutting, with our digital cutters, embroidery, creating designs and generating embroidery files, but also long arm quilting files, as well as artwork editing and generating those cut files. So it can do a lot for us to help us in our creative studio or creative space in our homes. And I always love to share things that I use mine for every single day. So we'll give a little bit of time for everyone to join. I expect that this will be a really good topic today. So we'll probably have lots of people here. So I'll just say hi to a few. I see the number is climbing up, so I know we have people still joining. So Linda Johnson, a fantastic, use of our software. I've seen some things that Linda has done, and so I know she uses our software to its fullest. So Joyce Gillett, thanks for being here as well. Cheryl from Virginia, thanks for being here. Eileen from Maryland, thanks for being here, Eileen. And we've got Dennis. I'm sorry, Denise. Sorry, Denise from Indiana. Carolyn, thanks for being here. Lots of names that I recognize. I see you guys on our Facebook group. I see you here at Software Success. Get questions from you guys on Facebook. So I love seeing all of you guys. Jackie, thanks for being here in upstate New York. Callie, thanks for being here as well. So Mountain House, California. So good to see you as well. You guys know Reen, our friend at Embroidery Garden. So Reen definitely uses our software and loves it. I get to see a lot of the fun things she's always doing, and I know you guys do too. So Catherine, thanks for being here. Cindy, my neighbor to the north, Harriet Ann Palmer, thanks for joining us today. And Dawn, thanks for being here, Dawn, from Creative Appliques. Laura, lovely to see you. Cora, oh my gosh, lots of people. I knew the quilt labels would be very popular, and that's what we're talking about today. So from Sam, thanks for being here from UK. And so I know Sam's like really getting great with the software. So I get to see the things she's doing on a Facebook group as well. So great to have all of you guys here with us joining. So our topic today that we are going to be learning about is quilt labels. This was another viewer request. So if you have a request of something that you want me to teach a software success on, if you go over to our Facebook group, there's actually a survey that we created that you can actually enter it, and it'll collect the data so that I can refer back to it in an easy way. It kind of organizes for us so I can get back to seeing that. So if you've got a topic request, go add that, and then I'll keep track of them and add them. So quilt labels was one of those things that someone asked about. So I thought I would share with you how I make my quilt labels, my favorite way to use them for my embroidery machine. And there's tons of different things that you can do. I feel like you can use decorative elements around the text. You can do something like you see in the picture here, where you have a miniature pieced block. And believe it or not, my embroidery machine did all of that for me, the piecing in the hoop and also the text. And, I was able to put a run stitch, turn it inside out. I mean, it's amazing what our machines can do. So different types of techniques and things. I've got just some ideas of some different quilt labels that I've made, but also Eileen has made through the years. And so I'll share some of those with you just for some inspiration. And we're going to talk about the font too, so micro fonts as well. So we got lots of things that we can share when doing labels. So, and as always, if you guys have questions, ask over in the chat. Because the chat moves so quickly and there's lots of people joining, if you do have a question, if you'll start it with a few question marks, and that'll just let me pick it out of the chat that's flying by really quickly, so I can make sure I can answer your questions. So and so I want to talk about like different types of quilt labels. So now what I do for a quilt label and what someone else chooses to do is really, it's a design preference. I really love to just make an individual label and then attach that to my quilt. Whereas Eileen, one of her favorite things that she always shared was making quilt labels and then sewing it into the binding. So it's like this triangle shape on the corner of the back of your quilt. And so that was one of her favorite ways to make a quilt label. And it's really a design preference. But labels we can use for not just quilts. This was one of my favorite blog posts from Eileen, where she created this label that she sewed into her daughter's wedding dress. And she put a little piece of ribbon with her mother's, so the bride's grandmother's wedding band in the inside of the dress. So labels can be great for not just quilts. So you might have some need for a label in other instances as well. But regardless of what you're doing, when we say a label, a lot of times it has a lot of text on it. So I do recommend, if you have a micro font, to use that, especially if you're putting a lot of text on your quilt label. If you're not putting, some people really do simple quilt labels where it just is, made with love from mom and the date. And then you can certainly get away with a regular embroidery font. But if you're putting a lot of text on your label, having a micro font option, this is text that'll stitch, less than a half inch. So you can see there in that image, it'll stitch down to 3 millimeters and it's still legible. But to stitch text this small, it's important to have the right ingredients to the recipe. So you want to have a font that's meant to be this tiny. So your standard font, it's not ideal to shrink it down this small. It doesn't normally stitch out great if the font is meant to be a regular size font, which would maybe be like a 3/4 inch or larger. But also, if you're using these micro fonts, you want to use a thread that is thinner, because our normal thread bulks up the design. You can't always read the text easily, like your O's and your A's will get closed in those center parts. And then if you are stitching fonts that are this small with a thinner weight thread, then you want to use a smaller blade needle. So like a 65-9 needle that we use. So when you're doing quilt labels, that's my number one recommendation. And your software has these micro fonts built in. If you are using Word Art and Stitches, it has the most options for micro fonts in Word Art and Stitches. And I took a little screenshot of those there. So that's the built-in fonts to Word Art and Stitches, and you access those from the toolbar and the letter F for font, and it's got like a magnifying glass over to signify that it's small or miniature. And if you are using another program, your fonts are going to be all in your list together, and you're looking for the ones that have a lowercase m for micro. So those are your micro fonts that are built into your software. And then we do have a font pack of micro fonts that you can purchase separately. And if you do, they install inside of your embroidery tool shed, and then you'll see them in this list just as I'm showing in the picture over to the right. Okay. So when you're putting a lot of information in a small area, micro fonts are crucial. And so those are the areas that you're looking for. So Patch and Applique Maker, Word Art and Stitches, and PEP have built-in micro fonts, or we have a separate font pack that would install inside of here. Okay, so now let me show you my favorite way to stitch my label using my embroidery machine, so that when we get over here to the software, we'll understand what we're creating this for. So this was a little project that I did for our friends at AccuQuilt. I used my AccuQuilt cutting system and my block piecer software to create this little quilt block here. And so on the left hand side of the block, it's a little miniature diamond in a square or square in a square block here. And I used micro text to put the text in the center, the date in the center of the block, and then just a added square over to the right with micro text as well. But what I like to do with my label, so especially like adding this little miniature block off to one side, I like to do as much in the embroidery hoop as possible because that's my favorite thing is embroidery. And so I don't like to do any sewing if I don't have to. And so I usually will have my embroidery machine create the block and I piece it in the hoop. And then you can see here that it's in the hoop with just stabilizer. And then on the right, I covered it with a piece of cutaway stabilizer. And that is our no-show stabilizer, or from OESD, it is also our poly mesh stabilizer. But that's a sheer cutaway stabilizer. It's very lightweight. So I cover it with that stabilizer and then I stitch a run stitch outline, which you can see in this image right here, okay, where it runs around the outside edge. And that stabilizer, I then will just cut a hole in it and turn it inside out. And so the stabilizer is basically helping me get my turned edge on my little quilt label, and I don't have to worry about flipping that over and ironing. And all of that is done in the hoop. Now all I need to do is attach it to my quilt. One other tip here is the stabilizer that I use. I like to use the fusible version of the poly mesh stabilizer or the no-show stabilizer by Exquisite. And so I put the fusible side face down on my label so that when I cut that opening and turn it inside out, that fusible allows me to bond it to my quilt. And it's a temporary bond, but it allows me to bond it to my quilt so that I can hand stitch it on and I don't even have to use any pins or anything like that. Okay. So that's how I like to do my labels. So I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to show you like a bunch of other ways that you can embellish your quilt labels, because you certainly could just stitch it on your piece of fabric and then use your sewing machine to create the quilt label just as you normally do. Okay. And so, I'll show you how to do that. And I'll show you how to create that extra run stitch and also use a block if you do like and use my block piecer. And then we'll talk about these features and what software I use them from whenever we see them in action. But I'm using features and tools from a variety of our different programs today. And of course, if you don't have the exact program that I do, you certainly can try it over in the shopping cart area. You can try it if you want. Or you can certainly purchase it as well. So over in our software, and I'm going to go over here to the shopping cart tab just to kind of give you guys some reminders. So I've been seeing a lot of questions on this here as well. So a few weeks ago, we updated our software, and in the shopping cart tab, we put the software into categories just to make it easier to find these programs. And so to expand these, you just click on the arrow and it will open up those different pieces of software. And you can see that I have all of mine activated because I have all my checks here, check marks, and then I also have them all along the side here, my icons. But I want to go down to the fonts and show you that we do have 6 different font collections that we sell separately. And the micro fonts, which is number 2 right here, is one of those font packs. So this font pack here, if you don't have micro fonts in your Dime software, you can purchase this separately and it will install into your software. So let's go over and just select our micro text and talk about that for a bit. So here I'm going to click my text tool and click on my workspace. And then over here, my properties area, we talked about text a couple of weeks ago, so I don't feel like I need to go over all the details here. We're really going to talk about your quilt labels more. But I do want to show you, in case you are new, that if you click on this yellow AABB here, it will open up my font list. And the micro fonts, we group them all together, and they're down toward the bottom of your list. And they have the word small after the name of the font. So it starts right here with Arial Small, and then it ends here at this Washi C Small here. And this group of fonts are all micro text. Now, the red ones are only from Word Art and Stitches. The yellow ones are from Perfect Embroidery Pro, and you might have some of them in Patch and Applique Maker software. And if you choose to purchase the micro font collection that we talked about over here, that's a separate purchase. If you don't have any of these, it will give you all of the yellow ones that you see here. The red ones are exclusive to Word Art and Stitches, but you have a really great selection. There's 11 different ones if you're purchasing that font pack, okay? So then when I choose one of these fonts, I'm just going to choose Arial Small. So if you watch over here in my properties, a normal font, the size that it comes in is usually a 0.79. That's the default size, and then we resize it up or smaller. But when you select a micro font, you can see that it switches that to the default is 0.24 over here in my properties area. And it's smaller. You can see that. But one of the things that about micro text and all of our other text, if you want to know the best size for it, if you hover over this window with the yellow text, a little flyout menu will come out, and it'll tell you recommended height range for this is a 0.16 to 0.31. And that is ideal stitching size for this font that we have selected. If we flip to millimeters here and we hover, it'll change that to millimeters. This one says 3 to 4 millimeters on this particular one. And each one is going to be different. It'll have a different set of characters. It depends on the font. So you can always check there for the resizing. Okay. So now micro fonts work the same as all of our other fonts. We would type our text here. I'm just going to say handmade with love from Aunt Betty, and then maybe we would put a date. So December, if I'm making this for somebody, you probably need to put like December 2040, because it'll take me forever to get that quilt done. But you'll put the date that you want, and then click apply. Okay. And then you can see here that it put all the text. Now, all of that text, I'm going to go back to inches. All of that text is it still is showing as a, let me make sure there's nothing else on the screen, because that's definitely bigger than I thought it should be. So let me go back to my select tool and select this. So even all of that text there that we see is 1 inch in height and about 2.5 inches wide here. And I'm just going to put that into the center of the screen, and we can kind of see our ruler here to be able to see exactly that. So that's, that's not a ton of information, but it is more than maybe your typical thing that you would put on something. And you can see that it is really small, and it's going to stitch out great. And of course you can change to a different text if you want to get a completely different look. Now, for quilt labels, you certainly could combine different text options if you want. And to do that, maybe we want the second half of our text to be something different. So I'm just going to select it and remove it. And I just copied it and cut it. Okay. And so then I've just got the handmade with love. And if I choose my text tool again and click on the workspace here, then I can enter the text, the last 2 lines, if that's what I want, and click apply. And then now I can change that to a different font. So maybe you want this micro text to be a little scripty one. So let's see what Diana looks like there. And then we can zoom out, put both of these together, and center them up if we wanted. Now, just a quick reminder that your text, you can edit the distance between the letters, which is kerning, which I definitely think I would want to do here on this first word. So if I go back to my text tool, click on my text, all of those little shapes allow me to edit. So I could move these closer. I could maybe use my um uh, move my M closer to my O here. I feel like the other ones look pretty good, but if you do want them to touch like cursive, you certainly can move them a smidge closer together. And then, of course, just, right mouse click on your color below to set your text color that you want. Okay. Or you could do a left mouse click. Now, so that is the micro text. So I'm not going to go into a ton more detail on that just because using our text tool is the same no matter what. So if you want to know more about that, then check with a previous video. I talked a lot about fonts and text 2 weeks ago. So you can certainly go back and watch that video if you want to learn more editing. So we'll use this as our example here for our text. Now, one of, to me, the easiest things to do is just use some decorative elements around your text. So built into a lot of our different software, we've got little miniature designs, which are the motif shapes here. And these are little, or not those, sorry, those would be shapes for our labels. If I click, I want my text design. So if I click right on the text with the book, so these little elements here are miniature designs. So if you wanted to use some of these designs, like maybe it's a cute little baby quilt here, so you could use these little bunnies. These miniature designs are great for this sort of thing because miniature designs, you need a smaller design, for your quilt label. So if you want to put some sort of embellishment, miniature designs work great for that. Those are your text designs, and you're going to have text designs in Perfect Embroidery Pro and Word Art and Stitches, but you have charm designs, which are miniature designs in Patch and Applique Maker and in the Hoop. So you can certainly go and use any of those designs as well. Okay. And the other thing that you can do is use a decorative shape if you want. So if I go back to these shapes here, you can see these little shapes we can use. This rounded oval is a really good one for just a regular kind of basic label. And if I go here to the applique shapes, I have a longer list. And any of these would be a cute little label. So it doesn't have to be just square or rectangular. You can certainly make custom shapes with it as well. So let's scroll back up here and look for something that maybe we would want to make. That might be a good one. Oh, the little bunny face might go with the bunnies. And so I can select that. It's an applique shape, and then I can resize that as large as I need to fit around my text. Okay, so I can just resize. Those ears may be a little bit crazy for a quilt label, but I think it would be super cute. So resize it to what you need. The software, and maybe we would do like this. Since this is wider, I might move this down. So I've just got that selected. And let's move our text up a little bit, like this, and then maybe this would fit down here a little better. And you can resize this design. It's already small, so I wouldn't go too terribly smaller, but you certainly could resize that. You could put it on different lines as well. We could shrink this up to fit it just like that. Here's our design. I think that's cute, right? And so if I select all of these, as well as my my outline of my bunny, I could use the horizontal align just to make sure everything's nice and lined up. I might move this down a smidge so it doesn't hit my letters, and maybe move this up a smidge. Okay, so to move that up and down, I selected it and I used my shortcut key, which is my nudge. And if I hold down the control key, I can push my arrow up or my arrow down, and you can see that it's just moving just a little bit as I do that. Okay, so control and the arrow keys on your keyboard will nudge, and you can do control shift and it'll take a larger nudge. So you can see how that moves much further whenever I do the control and the shift. So, okay. And now you could applique, this is an applique outline here. So you could applique this on if you want. And if you want to do it, say after the quilt is done, it could even be a run stitch. I can change that from a satin stitch to maybe just a decorative stitch or a run stitch if I want, so that it doesn't show through on the front of my quilt. Or you certainly could do it before your quilt is done. You could make it a patch and fuse it on. And there's all kinds of different things that you could do to stitch on your label. Okay. So that's a fun little shape. Now I've got another fun little thing to show you about bringing in a piece of fabric and tracing it. So if you want your quilt label to maybe match the shape of that. And then we'll talk about creating the little miniature block from my block piecer as well. So before we go on and get too much further away from this, let's see what questions we have. So I'm just going to back up and see where the questions start and see what we can answer. Okay, so I think Carolyn here asked the first question. So on the subject of fonts, I've found the regular font, it's easier to read than the micro font with the 60 weight thread. I am just weird, or is there a reason for that? So, so the micro font, because they're so miniature, it's really digitized in a way so that there's not a lot of overlapping. So you may just like the appearance of a regular font, but if you shrink it down really small, like say it's like that 3 millimeter, then you're even with the 60 weight thread, your full size font still may not look great. But what I always say, Carolyn, everything that I show you, there's no rules to all of this. It's just suggestions. And when we get to our embroidery machine, a lot of different things work different ways. So if you've got a way that you like that works, I say go for it. And so, but if you're, if anybody's ever struggling with doing something, then certainly these tips maybe would help you in creating. But if you like the way it looks, then I say go with that. Our friend Deborah Jones, she used to always say that you can't argue with results. So no matter what we say the rules are that you should do, but if the results come out great, then I would just keep doing it the way that you like it. So in Word Art and Stitches, Joyce said, do you know which are micro fonts? So yes, the same is true for whenever I showed the images from the drop down list. There is a lowercase m, or in Word Art and Stitches, there's the icon that looks like the magnifying glass over the letter F. Those are all microfonts. They say small after each one of those. So great question, Joyce. And then Linda says, wonderful ideas for the labels. I put them into use immediately. I know you will, Linda. Linda uses her software a lot, just like some of our other viewers as well. So, so is font in Word Art and Stitches. So font 2 in Word Art and Stitches. So in Word Art and Stitches, there are the most micro fonts in them. So if you're talking about a micro font that I was just using on screen, Catherine, Word Art and Stitches has more than any of our other programs on the micro fonts. So it would definitely be in there. And you could certainly always try and look if you don't have that one as well. So, okay. And so let's see what else. Catherine says, how do you prevent those threads between the letters? So the jump stitches between letters. So micro text, one of the things with micro fonts is you want to have as few, tie-offs as possible, because every time your machine ties a knot, then that increases the chance of something happening. So the micro fonts usually do a jump in between, but if you don't want that, you can actually turn that off and add a trim in between each character. And when I go back over to the software, I'll show you that. That's another great question. So, and then Lucy says, can you reduce the size of the font and use it as a miniature font? I would be cautious in that. So you could probably get away with the maybe the upper limit of a small font, but I would be very cautious. Do your testing. If you're taking a standard font and you're making it as small as like 3 millimeters, test that on your embroidery machine. What usually happens is that if you make it too small for the design, because of the amount of overlap of your full size fonts, you'll get thread buildup. And because it's such a tiny little area, that's usually where you'll get a lot of thread breaks or where the fonts come together. So, but as we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of times things that will work. It doesn't always have to be exactly what we say. So test it. If you have a font and you shrink it down as small as you need it, then test it, see if it stitches out well. Also, you can try the 60 weight thread. That'll give you a little bit of wiggle room there for your text. So, but yeah, like we said, Deborah always said you can't argue with results. So, and then Marianne said, are the miniature designs small enough that you would use 60 weight thread? So the miniature designs are digitized for 40 weight thread. So even though they are small, the fill areas and the detail is not super tiny. So you would use your regular 40 weight thread. None of them were digitized for 60 weight. I do have some examples of things that were digitized for 60 weight, but I'll tell you how you would tell the difference in the software. After you type, Laura says, out your text, can you save and open it in another program to get a design you want? Yes, you sure can. So Laura, that goes both directions. So if you have another program that you have a design in, you could save that design out of the other program and open it in your embroidery tool shed, or the reverse is true too. Once you create your text, you could save that and then use it in another program as well. So really good questions. So then Lucy says, I have an Avenir and I have connect to the machine in the Hoop Designer. It says the design is sent, but so Lucy, the currently our embroidery software cannot send to the Avenir and the Radiance. So that is something our team is aware of, but at this moment in time, we cannot send wirelessly to the Avenir. And then Jeanette says, can you use any other type of stabilizer that you mentioned? So you could. I usually do the a lightweight cutaway just so it doesn't add bulk to my label. So, but you certainly could use a tearaway. Just be careful when you turn your label inside out that you don't rip the tearaway stabilizer at the edge of the stitching. And then other cutaway stabilizer might work well too. So I know from OESD, a woven stabilizer that is a woven cutaway. It feels like muslin almost with the fusible side, so that might work. But yeah, you could use other things. I just use the no show or either the poly mesh because it's very lightweight, doesn't add a lot of bulk, and I can get it with a fusible so that I can bond it. So another really good question. So hey, BJ's another neighbor a little further north, but nice to see you here. She said, if you own several software, all fonts that come with them all show up when you use the text tool, right? That is correct, BJ. So if you make Embroidery Tool Shed or Perfect Embroidery Pro as the default, those threads would show up as the or those fonts would all show up under your font library, your text tool. So yeah, absolutely, really good question. So okay, those are great questions. So keep them coming. So let's head back over and talk about how we can create a label that we have that little stitch around the outside. Okay, so here the Handmade with Love, our text. And so if we talk about the trims in between, so the little stitches in between, those are jump stitches. And in your software, depending on which program you have, the commands option here is going to allow you to tell the design, to tell your machine to either do a trim between characters, between words, between lines, after capitals only, or if they're longer than a certain distance. Okay, so if you want it to trim in between every character, then choose characters and it'll actually trim in between each letter. So let me put on a bigger text on the screen and then we'll see exactly what that's like. So I'm going to go to a just a normal font here so that it is larger. Just go to our Arial here and let's make that bigger so you can see my stitches on the screen there, but I want to make it bigger to see if more jump. Oh, and then it took it away, but that's okay. So because watch this, I can turn on my command tool over here on the left hand side. So I'm going to turn off of the 3D so we can see this really well. I'm going to change the color to a lighter color so that we can see it, and then this button to the far left And my cursor here is the commands. If I turn that on, do you see how it's got a little pair of scissors at the end of each letter? And so if I go, let's do hello, hello. I'll be very creative. So let's just do 2 rows of hello, and or maybe 3 rows of hello. And just like that. So if I go back over here to those commands, and I switch it to trim after words, watch those little scissors. Excuse me. Now you can see I only have a little pair of scissors here, and you can see the jump stitches there. If I turn my 3D back on, do you see the jump stitches? Okay. So then now I only have a trim at the end of each word, and it's going to trim before stitching here. And then if I go, I can trim between lines, which essentially in this case is the same as a word. But if I go back to my text here, and if I put, say, 2 hellos on one line, and then turn off my 3D so we can see it. And so I had switched these commands to lines. So now it's only trimming at the end of this line and this line. Okay. So you can choose these different settings here as to when you want the software to tell your machine to take a trim. Just be very, again, very cognizant of all the trims, because these letters, not only are they so small, but they're so close together. And so your machine will tie a knot before the trim and then trim it. And so the more your machine stops, moves, ties knots, does trims, that actually increases the chances that something goes wrong. If you can just let your machine stitch and not do those extra things, then a lot of times it'll be a trim or a knot tying that might cause a thread break or something like that gets snagged. So okay, all right, so let's open up a new page here, and for this one let me show you a couple of different examples here. So this is kind of exactly what we just did with this shape. Okay, so this is a quilt label that I made a long time ago. I can't even believe that's been over 10 years now, but this was for a little nephew, and this whale shape was part of the fabric that was in the quilt. So let me show you what I did with this one. So I'm going to open up a new workspace, and I'm going to choose File and Load Backdrop. You guys have seen me do this numerous times. This fabric here was the fabric that was actually in the quilt. I took a picture of it, or you can even look online for a swatch of fabric, and then you could actually trace this shape and create a matching label. Okay. Now, I can trace this with my artwork tool. A lot of our dime software has, actually, I think nearly everyone almost has the artwork pen tool that will allow me to trace this. Now, to trace something, I'm going to zoom in. Let's zoom into this one here, this green one, so we can see my line on it. Go back to my pen tool, and I can trace around this by just clicking. Okay. And anytime I want to make a curved point, I would hold down my control key to click around all of these points. Okay. Now I could keep going until I have this traced, and then I could turn that into an applique stitch. If you have Perfect Embroidery Pro, or I think My Quilt Embellisher, are 2 programs that have this magic wand, watch this magic happen. Okay, so I'm going to choose my artwork tool, and then my wand becomes available, and I click my wand tool up here in the top middle, and then my wand will auto trace. Okay, so I'm just going to click one time in the center of this green well here, and I chose this one because you can see the others are cut off. I have a whole well that's green, or either this blue one here, but even the bottom of this one is a little cut off. Okay, so now if I hide my fabric, that is my well shape. I'm just going to rotate it. So my rotate option here, and then I can turn this into an applique design, or, and that's what I did around the outside. And then I created an outline around it, but I did get rid of the center eye here. So I'm going to break apart. Break apart means it separates out my pieces so that now I can delete this part. And then I just turned this into an applique. So if you have Perfect Embroidery Pro, over in your your effects panel over here, I can just click to turn that into an applique. If you have other dime software, your applique icon might be on the toolbar. And then because I wanted this to, I turn it inside out, I actually created an outline. So utility, create outline. And I made that about a, quarter inch or 2/10 of an inch distance, and then click OK. And then I made that into a run stitch. So clicked my run stitch. I could also right mouse click, convert to a run stitch. You can see that run stitch is not available because it's already a run, or your run stitch may be on your toolbar. Okay. So now what I would do with this is stitch the design itself, and I would put my text in here. So if we go back to this one here, it's going to stitch the applique, and then I would stitch the text on top of that, and then I would put my piece of stabilizer, and it could stitch around it so I could turn it inside out. Now, in this case here, this would be super helpful because to turn in a quarter of an inch to something that's shaped kind of like this might be a challenge. Okay, so that's something that I definitely like to do, and that is a fabric that I own, and I created a label. It was in the quilt that I made for that example. Okay, so now let's see what else I've got. Okay, I've got some other examples here. So this is a quilt label that I made with a long rectangular piece of fabric, and I just flipped it over, and then the buttonhole is on the back. And so that was my opening for turning. So you could do that with the backing. You could also stitch and leave an opening for turning, like in your run stitch if you wanted to. But again, double layers of fabric are just adding bulk. That's why I went to using my stabilizer. Plus, we know our stabilizer, some of them are a lot cheaper than your fabrics. So here's another really cute example. So this is actually a little label that Lean created and put in the inside of a handbag. You could put handmade for you. You could put with love, mom, on the inside of a handbag that you made for someone. And it's a cute little handbag label. So I just thought that was adorable. You could also put a little monogram on it for their monogram if you wanted. So just another really cute example. And then here is an example of one where I used this decorative frame. That's an applique. Okay, so the applique design and that shape was built into the shapes that are in my software. So you can look under the applique shapes. If you have other dime software, like say the Special FX, it's called frames. I'm over here to the far right. And so all of these frames, you could find some in here that would make great quilt labels. If you have In the Hoop Designer, it has some shapes as well that you could convert to applique. That would be great shapes for your quilt labels also. These fun little shapes here I really like. So in this case here, I did an applique, and you can see I've got 3 different types of micro text versus just one to add a little extra interest, and then a little bouquet of miniature balloons. And then this is applique, and then I've got this big rectangle here so I can turn it inside out to, you know, stitch my stabilizer down there. So it doesn't have to follow along this shape, but it certainly could. So depending on the look that you're going for, like here. So I've got text. This run stitch could be the run stitch that tacks my stabilizer or my piece of fabric on, and then I turn it inside out. So that's entirely a design choice. So it's up to you. Okay. And then there is also doing quilt labels with a block in the hoop that can be pieced in the hoop, and then you can add your text here. And when we come back, I'll answer some questions, and then I will go back and show you that part as well. So let's just back up here and see if we have any other questions. I don't see any other questions. Wow. Must be answering all those questions as I go. So the last question that I saw was BJ, and I answered that. So, okay, so then let's go right to the my block piecer then. Okay, since there's no questions or comments. Okay, so my block piecer is a program that will allow you to piece a block in the hoop. Okay, so let me open up a new workspace here and I'll show you how it works by itself, and then we'll show how we can make it into a quilt label. Okay, so my block piecer over here on the right hand side, here's my quilt block option, and all of these blocks built in you can select and it'll create a file that can be pieced in the hoop. Okay, so this block here was the one that I used on my little AccuQuilt label, and I actually made this fit my AccuQuilt cutting system. So I have the 4-inch cube, and so this would be one patch of my 4 patch, so it would be a 2 inches in height. Okay, and then I added an additional square that I could piece. So, but first let's create the file and I'll show you the steps here. So in my block piecer, over here on the far right, I just choose my workflow tool with that selected, and then I click my auto build option and sort numbers. That puts it in numerical order. And then when I click preview, you can see these are all the run stitch lines that are going to piece that block together. Okay, so that is a really easy way to piece a block in the hoop. But what I did was I put the date in the center, but I needed another block to put text out to the side. So I just created a rectangle. So in our software, we can draw. So I can draw the rectangle, and then I can click and drag to make it the size that I need. But I want to set it to be exactly 2 by 2 so that it fits my quilt label. Okay, and then I'm going to turn on my snap to grid. I right mouse click on my ruler bar, snap to grid, snap to guidelines, snap to anchor points. All those things will help your design kind of snap right in place. Okay, and so I'm going to turn on my grid. And then I can move this design around and it kind of will snap right to that grid so that I know that it's lined up perfectly. Okay. And now when I select everything, I'm going to just turn my grid back off. I feel like it's distracting when we're on here. And let's go back to my block piecer and then create the piece in the hoop block. So here's my workflow. And then now I do this auto build again, sort numbers. So it's in numerical order, preview. And so now it's going to piece this little bitty miniature block over here to the left. And then the last part of this is going to piece this piece over to the right. And that's where I put my little, my text is over there on the right with that miniature font. Okay. And so now I'm going to say save, and we'll open up this block and I'll show you how to add the text. So I'm just going to go put this in my downloads, and we're going to call this our quilt block. And once I save it, it opens up where I save it. And then I'm going to open up the block itself. So if I double click this, it'll open in my software. And there is the stitch file that's going to piece it together. Okay. And then I'm going to use this same text over here just because I don't have to then type or do anything like that. So we're going to go back to our quilt block somewhere, probably way down here. There we go. And then paste. Okay. And so there's my text, and you'll have probably more text, but look how small that is in this tiny little area. That's the beauty of having that micro text. Okay. So now here's what's going to happen. So let's watch our slow redraw. I use this tool all the time. Slow redraw is going to show us how this design is going to stitch out. Okay. So basically the first thing it's going to do is it's going to give me a placement stitch for my entire quilt label. And then it numbers it so that I know where to put my pieces of fabric. Okay. And then the first piece, it's going to, that I place down right here in the center, it's going to tack it down. That'll be right side up. And then every piece after that, you can see it gives me a seam line. I'll put right sides together and flip it. So it'll actually seam my block together. And then the last thing is this center one here that we added on so that it will stitch our last block. So now after that's stitched, then my text is going to stitch. Okay. just like that. Now, I could take that out of the hoop, and certainly sew a piece of fabric around it on my regular sewing machine. But if it's already in the hoop, why not let the machine do it? So that's where I use my rectangle tool again up here in the top middle. Choose the rectangle option, and I just draw a rectangle just barely inside of that stitch so that it is going to make sure that I don't see my seams. Okay, and then I'm going to turn off my snap to grid and anchor points because it's making it to where I can't get this right where I want it. So now I'm just resizing this rectangle so that it is just barely inside my stitching. So if I don't get something spot on, I won't see it. Okay, and then I'm going to turn that into a run stitch. So over here in my effects panel, or your run stitch option may be on your toolbar to convert it to a run stitch. And now that's the last thing that's going to stitch out so that I can put my piece of fabric face down and it'll stitch, and then I can just cut a hole in either the fabric or if you choose to use stabilizer like I do. So, and it's nice because the stabilizer is kind of lightweight as well. So what do you guys think about that? Isn't that cool? Okay, so I'm going to go over here to my camera really here, and then I'll show you. So here's one that I have done, and you can see the stitching all around. And I just cut this hole because it's going to be on the back. You're not going to see it, so I don't have to leave an opening, and then I turn it inside out. Now, this is another one of those piece in the hoop blocks, but instead of adding the little piece of fabric on the side, I pieced this and I put the text in the center, okay? And so then I just need to poke out my corners. Now on the back, you can actually kind of see that this stabilizer has a shimmer to it. That's the fusible part, okay? And so then I would take this and I would press that to the back of my quilt, and it's going to hold it in place while I stitch it on. One word of caution: this is fusible. Now it is a not a permanent bond, it's just a temporary bond. But when you're ironing this flat, after you turn it inside out and you've poked out all your corners, iron it flat on a non-stick pressing sheet so that this will peel up. Don't iron this onto your ironing board because then it will stick to your ironing board instead of your quilt. But press it first, but use a non-stick pressing sheet. Get your corners all pushed out, and then you can fuse that onto your quilt. So just another few tips there of things that you can do. Okay, so and then one last thing here that I wanted to share with you before we go to our Q&A again. So if you have never done a quilt label by this before, you guys know that we are part of the OESD family now, and OESD's designs are phenomenal, and I'm so excited to be a part and have access to these. But if you go to oesd.com and search quilt label, there are lots of labels that are here created. And so I'm just going to hit enter so it'll bring all of them up. Okay. And if you click on any one of them, it will give you instructions. Before you ever even buy the design, you can see how it stitches out. So let's use this one as an example. And if I click on the instructions here, it'll give you a PDF. And if I go all the way down to how I stitch this out, it shows me exactly what to do. Okay, so you could also purchase this design collection and then just change the design. You can do that in your software. That's another option. And then there's different ways to do things here too. So if you go back, this cute little baby shower quilt label here, and I click on the instructions, I'll get the PDF instructions for stitching this out. And this one here, you can see it does a similar kind of stitch out, but instead of using a piece of stabilizer, this one leaves an opening and you put fabric on the back that you're going to turn inside out. So just a different way, but you can certainly go over there and take a look at those and purchase any of those quilt labels that maybe you would like. Now, the software that I was using today, remember I said I used a combination of a lot of different software, and the dime tools that I used mostly here, the micro fonts are part of Perfect Embroidery Pro, Word Art and Stitches, and Patch and Applique Maker. And there are built-in fonts in a lot of our software, as you can see there. But the Run Stitch tool that we created, the outline, is part of those programs you see there: PEP, My Quilt Embellisher, My Block Piecer, Vintage Embroidery, My Lace Maker, Patch and Applique Maker, Cut and Stitch, and Special Effects. All have that Run Stitch tool that you could create in order to stitch your stabilizer on the back. Okay. Now, one last thing that I want to show you, if I head back over here to my software one last time, another really cool way to embellish your text for a label. I'm just going to go over here and maybe remove or copy and paste some text. So let's just use this text here and open up a new workspace and text and paste it. Okay. You can also put just a decorative frame around it. Okay. In My Quilt Embellisher, there are tons of what we call decor. And so if you have My Quilt Embellisher, you'll see all of these things come up. And these are really pretty little swirls and elements that you can add to your text just to give it a little bit different look. So there's decor, and you can always resize them. Okay. And if I go back over here to My Quilt Embellisher, there's also borders. Okay. And these borders would be really cute around any of your label examples. So I'm going to get rid of that and then move our text into our shape. So isn't that cute? Okay, so you could use those borders. And one other thing that you can use is in Perfect Embroidery Pro and Word Art and Stitches, these monogram designs, these are also frames that would be really cute to put around your labels. And I'm going to go find one here. So these frames here are really small for monograms, but like this one right here, it says it's digitized for 40 weight thread. This one's digitized for 60 weight thread. So that's a clue that you need to use that different weight of thread. So I'm going to use the one for 40 weight thread here, and then I'm going to rotate this one around. And we could use that for our text instead of, and we could even make it a little bit bigger if we wanted, instead of doing an applique or something like that. And I can make my text smaller. So isn't that beautiful? So those monogram frames are part of Word Art and Stitches. Okay, so those are another way. But look within your software, there is all kinds of things that you might have already in your software that you can then use to embellish your quilt label if you want. So isn't that pretty? Oh, I just love that. So, and we really should be making labels. I know it's not our favorite part of what we're doing, but we like to do the quilting and the piecing, but certainly it is a necessary part of our quilting. So, okay, so let's go back. I'll just see what our other questions are. And so BJ says, I have PEP as my default and the magic wand doesn't show. How do I get it to show? So the magic wand is for use with your Run Stitch tool or with your artwork tool. You have to select artwork or Run Stitch first, artwork pin or Run Stitch first in order for it to be illuminated. So, and then BJ clarified there for the backdrop. So, and then Sandra says, which of the quilt block lines is the sewing line? So the outside of the quilt block, whenever it's pieced, that is your seam line if you're using the sewing line of the quilt block. So that outside line where it tacks everything down. The color coding in My Block Piecer, when you open up like a set of the instructions, it'll tell you what each color means. So usually I think it's green is tacking down the first piece of fabric, and the red is your seam line, and the black line is whenever it opens it up and stitches it together. So, All right. So great question. All right. And then Carolyn says, what's an example of a nonstick pressing sheet? So Carolyn, you may have heard them called Teflon sheets, applique sheets, but it's just a nonstick sheet that you a lot of times will like a cover sheet for ironing so that your fusible materials doesn't get stuck to the back of your iron. So really good question. So awesome. Okay. So I think that we covered all of the questions there. So I will call that good since we answered all the questions. And so I just wanted to ask you to join me again in a couple of weeks. So on September the 2nd, I will be back for the next software success. And we're going to talk about splitting a design and multi-hooping designs. So that's September the 2nd. So join me 1 p.m. Central, just like always on our Facebook or our YouTube channel. So I can't wait to see you then. That was another user request or viewer request. So I'm trying to get through. If you asked, I'm trying to make sure to show all of the things, sometimes multiple things together, but certainly I'll try to get through everyone's request. And as always, we have our software for sale on our website. But if you have a favorite brick and mortar dealer, visit them, buy the software for them, support your favorite store so that they get your business. And two, it's a place for you to go to get help with the software. So, all right. So that's the last thing that I have, guys, for this week's software success. So until 2 weeks from now, when I see you on September the 2nd, I'll say bye for now and thank you all for being here.